tonight we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5 again. I know you were probably surprised by that because we've only been in Matthew chapter 5 for, 8 of the 10 weeks of coronavirus season so far. But we are just forging right ahead through Matthew chapter 5. We may even get to Matthew chapter 6 one of these days. But
we were just going to do a 2-week study on the Sermon on the Mount.
Right. But you're just getting such in-depth insight here from us. So last week we talked about adultery and what Jesus said about it, that really the only difference between the adulterer and the one burning with lust and giving into that lust is that the adulterer acts on it physically, but the condition of the heart before God is the same. Well, he turns from that discussion of adultery into a discussion of marriage. And I think we talked about it a little bit, I think we can probably combine the section on marriage and the section on oath-taking together, because I think they're really trying to make the same point, which I hadn't thought about before, because typically we try to take the adultery section and the marriage section together. But I think these two go together pretty well. So we're in Matthew chapter 5 tonight. If you'll take out your Bibles or your device of some sort and get a copy of God's Word in front of you. Matthew chapter 5, we're going to start in verse 31. It says, "Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery." And it goes on in verse 33 to say, "Again you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair black or white, but let your yes be yes, and your no, no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one." All right. So you may be sitting there at home wondering, well, how do these two have anything to do with each other? How can you combine them into one point? So if we just want to rip the spoiler alert off of it, I'll tell them how these two work together, then we can go back and talk about each other.
Marriage is made by an oath, and that's what we're told. It's serious when we take an oath before God, and it's, when we get married, it's not just an oath to your wife, which it is, but it's an oath under God that you promise to keep. So there it is, right there.
Both of these are about being people of our word who honor our commitments. Whether he's talking about these men these men making marriage vows to their wives and then just casting them aside because they got tired of them, or people having to dream up all these ways of making oaths and vows to prove that they're telling the truth instead of just telling the truth. I mean, it's kind of silly if you think about it, to say things and to think, well, I've got to come up with a whole other way of speech to make it believable because my normal speech is so unbelievable. So I swear by the temple. I swear by Jerusalem. I've mentioned this a few times before, but I like watching police shows. And whenever they're investigating a subject and the subject says, quote, "This is not me, this is them," but they say, "I swear to God," automatically I know they're lying 9 times out of 10. When you feel the need to say, or they say, I'm just going to be straight up honest with you, lies. What you're about to hear is a lie. Now, I will say that sometimes just as a conversational thing, but I'm not being investigated at the time. But if somebody constantly is having to tell you, well, just to be honest with you, or I'm not going to lie to you, or I swear to whatever. My estimate is 9 times out of 10, what follows is a lie. They've just developed a habit of lying to the point where they have to up the ante, so to speak, because they're not true to their word. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm not saying I have never lied, but we try to practice ruthless truthfulness. You might say that 5 times fast. try to practice this kind of truthfulness in our home where we're going to be brutally honest. Maybe not brutally, but we're going to be honest. And some people have thought we're a little strange because we've told our children the truth about all sorts of cultural, mystical things, mythical things that my children, I'll just say my children know that my children know where the Christmas presents come from. My children know, so if you're watching with children, I should have said that. My children know who brings them money for their teeth. My children know all this stuff, and just because we drilled it into them from a young age, we tell the truth. And so we realized real quick we had to model that for them too. I'm not saying if you told your children something other than what we've told them that you're not telling the truth. I'm just saying that for us, we're going to practice this in every area. So, we tell the kids the truth even when it's hard. Hey, what happened to Pawpaw? Well, he died. What happened to the dog? We had to put him down. He was sick. We tell the truth. But because of that, if I tell my kids something, they don't even question that I'm telling them the truth because I've worked hard to cultivate that reputation with the kids. So that's really the point I was trying to make.
But then again, as Christians, is this not what Jesus is really telling us here?
Yeah.
That we need to cultivate a character within ourselves that when we speak, people don't question us because they know it's truthful. Mm-hmm. In other words, when we go all the way back to adultery and the shaping of the mind, we're talking about the same thing here. When we start with what our heart believes, and we start with that, then it comes to outward action of being truthful, to being honest with other people and all like that, and being unquestionable. I mean, let's face it, in the world today, that's an oddity. I come out of a grocery store, I had something on the very bottom cart, I think it was some soda pop or something, and I realized on my ticket that the cashier had not rung it up. Mm-hmm. So you go back in and you pay for it. Mm-hmm. That cashier couldn't talk to me for about 5 minutes, it seemed like, because she's like, what, you're actually coming back in and paying for this? Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I walked out and didn't pay for it, it's stealing, right? Yeah. But, that's, I don't need to make a statement of, okay, I'm going to tell you the truth now. Or, and I know in our court system we still have, the people swear on the Bible, but, really as a Christian, in our everyday walk with life, we don't need to make any other statements. Right. Well, we need to be honest, Yeah.
And some people have interpreted this part kind of legalistically, where they think they cannot take an oath. They can't take the oath in court. They can't be sworn in, to office, swearing an oath. And I think our legal system allows you just to affirm those things. But they say, because of, I remember sitting in court. I don't remember why I was in court, but I was about 8 years old. And sitting in court one day, and this guy comes in charged with something. He's like, well, because of the tenets of my religion, I can't swear it. Okay, you can do that affirmation. They've made it this legalistic thing, like Jesus here is telling us, don't swear oaths. That's not what he's talking about. You could certainly say, I'm going to refuse to swear oaths out of literal obedience to this, and that's fine, but that's not the point. The point was cultivating this kind of honesty. He says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Say what you mean what you say, and don't play games. That's a phrase that was bandied about in my youth group days. We would say, swim with the pig, which is the acronym, say what you mean what you say, and don't play games. You want to cultivate that reputation, and not just the reputation, but the actual character of being somebody who tells the truth. If I say yes, it's because I mean yes. If I say no, it's because I mean no. I'm not playing games here. I'm not making up stories. I'm not hedging anything. You want to cultivate the, and I try to drill this into my kids. They still have issues with it, as kids will do, but I try to drill it into them. I guess I shouldn't do that when I say about my kids, right? And I try to drill it into them. You know, you are going to develop a reputation over time based on how you are, how you act. Do you want to have a reputation of being someone who lies, or do you want to have a reputation of being somebody who's believable? That's what Jesus is saying here. Tell the truth. Be that kind of person that doesn't need to swear the oath. Be the kind of person that doesn't need to go to their wife or their boss or whoever and say, "Oh, I swear on my kid's life." Be the kind of person that you say it, and even if they're thinking, "Well, that sounds kind of funny," I believe it because that guy tells the truth.
But you hit the nail on the head with the oath, because we look at the context of what Jesus is saying. It's okay to make an oath. Mm-hmm. You know, you take an oath for an office and different positions and what have you. But what they're doing is they're making an oath that they're telling the truth. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at it in the context of the people he was talking to at this time.
Yeah. So the oath for the Christian is not, I would say it's not unscriptural, but scripturally it should be unnecessary. It should be one of those things, okay, you want me to put my hand on the Bible and swear? Fine, but I would have done that anyway, with or without the oath. That's what he's calling us to.
Exactly.
So, and on the same, being people of our word that keep our commitments, you know, we make that oath to our spouse. Till death do us part, till death parts us. And, you know, we promise to be faithful to one another forever. We promise to love one another forever. And I've heard people joke that forever doesn't last as long as it used to, because a lot of times people go into that and maybe they don't mean it, or maybe they just decide that, well, even though I made the commitment, I'm not really feeling it anymore, so I'm just going to move on. And you know, when I've counseled with couples that were planning, I don't get asked to do a whole lot of weddings anymore because of the premarital counseling. I'm pretty brutally honest about what's involved here. But I've told them there are going to be times that you wake up and you're not feeling it. There are going to be I don't mean you don't love your spouse, but there are going to be times. There are going to be times you get in an argument and you may not feel like you like them anymore. So I tell my wife from time to time, I like you. And at first, when we first were married, she'd say, I thought you loved me. Well, I do, but I also like you, and they're both important. But, you know, you may wake up one morning and you've been in a fight, or you're just in a bad mood that day, and you may not like them particularly. They may not like you. And you may think, I don't want to do this anymore. Not even that you don't want to be married anymore. You just don't want to live up to that commitment to self-sacrificial, putting them ahead of you kind of love. Well, that's why it's a commitment, because you made the decision already that you're going to do that, whether your feelings tell you to or not. And I think that's where we get into a lot of trouble, is we're led by our feelings.
Exactly, because, you know, especially, not even especially, there's people this day that, you know, think, well, I love this person and I'm going to get married. But in reality, it's an infatuation, a feeling, and a love for somebody is something we choose to do. And that's what Jesus is getting to the point here with his disciples. They got strayed so far away from what the Bible was really teaching, because it was never intended as a set of rule books. And that's exactly what they had looked at it as. And even me as a young Christian, I wanted to first open up the Bible and look at it as a rule book. But no, that's not what it's all about. It's about a heart condition, about living for God, about what's in your heart should be exemplified through your actions, and vice versa. So, you know, during this time, these, you know, the Jews lived by the law. It was all about outwardly appearance. Jesus is turning it 180 degrees, going to inward appearance first. And then once you get the inside cleaned up, the outside. I mean, like, if you go do dishes and you wash your glass, you're not gonna just wash the outside, you're gonna wash the inside too. I mean, like,
That's true. Well, and to really understand what this said about the condition of their hearts, we need to bring in a little bit of historical context. I believe it's, well, now I can't remember, Deuteronomy 24 or Leviticus 24. There's a spot in Moses' law where it talks about if your wife finds uncleanness in your eyes, then you give her a bill of divorcement. You couldn't just put her out, you had to give her a bill of divorcement. We'll talk a little bit about what all this means. And then there's a dispute in Matthew chapter 19, which I'm going to turn there for just a second. That's where Jesus talks to the Pharisees really along these lines of what he said here in Matthew chapter 5. He takes them, the Pharisees come and they ask him, Matthew 19:3, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? And the reason they were asking that is because there was this debate where different schools of thought were debating over that Old Testament passage that I mentioned. And not only were looking at the scriptures instead of instructions on how to glorify God, they were looking at it as religious rules, but they were also saying, how can I work this to my advantage and find a loophole where I can still do what I want to do, where I can still fulfill the ugliness in my heart, but outwardly look, good and godly in front of other people. And so there were two schools of thought. One, I don't think these rabbis were still alive, but those that followed the Rabbi Hillel, who had taken this word uncleanness to mean any source of displeasure, and they would say, the followers of Hillel would say, that you could, if your wife did anything that displeased you, you could put her out. You just had to give her a bill of divorce. Followers of, and the classic example given is if your wife burned dinner and you didn't like that, you could get rid of her. You just had to give her a bill of divorce, which is something that at least Moses required that. God allowed it, and Moses required it, that they had to be given a bill of divorce. Your wife couldn't just be cast out into this state of limbo where she's still technically married to you and where was she going to go get a job? She can't marry another man to support her because she's still married to you, but meanwhile you've kicked her out of the house. And so by God allowing Moses to give them this command about the bill of divorcement, it was a protection for the wife where the marriage is officially dissolved, she could go marry somebody else. So don't let the people tell you that the Bible demeans women. Throughout the Bible, it was constantly elevating the status of women from anything else they enjoyed in the ancient world. But this was a protection for the woman. And Hillel said, as long as you give her the bill of divorcement, you can divorce her for any reason. Followers of the Rabbi Shammai said, no, that word uncleanness means sexual immorality. So you can't just divorce her because you got tired of her, bill of divorcement or not. The followers of Shammai said she has to have done something wrong to have severed the marriage covenant, and even then it wasn't a requirement. He said it was because of the hardness of their hearts. Not necessarily the hardness of the heart putting the one out, but the hardness of the heart even of the one who's committing the adultery. Somebody's hardness of heart was contributing to the divorce because it was not God's plan. Jesus said here, he referred them back to God's design in the beginning. He made them male and female, and for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And verse 6 says, so then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let not man separate. That's why Jesus said, this wasn't God's ideal design for you. God allowed it because God allowed divorce because somebody's heart was hardened. But Jesus sided with the followers of Shammai here, and said it was one of the rare instances where Jesus affirmed something some of the Pharisees were thinking, and said, no, it's only in cases of adultery. Because here's what he says in Matthew 19:9, I say to you, Whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. So we've got this statement in Matthew 19 that if you cast your wife out because you just are tired of her and go marry somebody else, you're an adulterer. Guess what? You think you're covered under this loophole that you seem to have found in the law, but you're really just casting your wife out for no reason, for another, and running after another woman. And then in chapter 5, he says something very similar, that if you're doing that, if you're casting your wife out for any reason other than sexual immorality, you're causing her to commit adultery. So trying to cover yourself and trying to find a legal loophole out of your commitment here, when she's done nothing wrong, you may think you've covered yourself and that legally you're okay and you'll look good according to the law, but really you're just demonstrating, you're making adultery abound and you're showing what's in your heart. So, I've spent a lot of time studying this passage, so I feel like I've monopolized that part of the conversation, but...
Why not? I'm hesitant to touch it because of, I remember what is happening during this time. Today, a woman can go work and do things and earn a living. During this time, it was really, really hard for her to do that. There was very limited jobs. Their predominant job was within the household, taking care of the home, the cooking, cleaning, things like that. A predominantly female role of thinking of at one time. I know that we don't think that way anymore because there's women that go out and work and the husbands stay home, and that's fine. But, when I look at this, those women were treated as possessions at that time, as a piece of property. And, you said, if they burned the supper, they could get thrown out. Well, you know what? It sounds like an exaggeration, but really, in this day and time, if the woman wasn't a good cook, it would happen.
Yeah.
Because
people get divorced over less today.
Exactly. So, Bible says, if you're unequally yoked, don't get married. And really what that's saying, we won't get into that to a whole lot, because that's a big, that's opening up a big can of worms there. But, what it's saying is, if you're going to be married and you're a Christian, your wife needs to be a Christian also. If you think you're going to change that person, this goes for the woman as far as the man. When you enter a marriage, you're entering it with the person that they are. Yeah. God will change them, and like me and my wife weren't close to God when we got married, but we've both grown closer. And it's part of that triangle deal, whereas if she's coming closer to Christ, I'm coming closer to Christ, then we can't help but grow closer together. Yeah. And it unifies the marriage. But it's all about relationships. And if we're being honest with people, we're loving people the way we should do. If we go back to the Beatitudes and we have those same attitudes, then the marriage is not going to be without its problems, but it can survive. And we're not criticizing by any means here people that have had problems, had divorces, whatever the case may be in your life. We're not criticizing any of that. We're not saying anybody's wrong. We're just saying, what Jesus is trying to portray here.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear on that, because I know this can be such a touchy topic. If you've been through a divorce, we are not attacking you. We're not trying to beat you up. Many of you know that I've been through one myself, not by my choice, and with biblical grounds, but still not by my choice. And so, that's why I've studied this so much, to make sure I understand what Jesus teaches about it. So, if you've been through that, please don't take any of this as we're attacking you. I feel nothing but compassion for you, even if, even if your divorce wasn't biblical. I think sometimes people think, well, I'll just be happier if I get divorced. And typically that's not the case. And I've seen in so many circumstances how people have been hurt by these things, even when they've made the decisions that led to it. I want you to know, if you've been through this, I have compassion for you. You know, this is not intended to beat you up. As Greg said, we're trying to tell you this is what Jesus said about it. And the point that Jesus was trying to make through all of this, I don't think was so much about divorce as getting them to understand that they needed to be people of their word and live up to their commitment in their marriage. Because when he, in Matthew 19, when he goes back to God's design in Eden, for a man and a woman to be married and to be one flesh, to be together and enjoy that intimacy, and it's not just the physical intimacy, he's demonstrating what God created marriage to be. And when marriage, to the extent that that any marriage can ever live up to what God designed it to be, there is nothing better in this world. I don't profess to have a perfect marriage, but I think I've got a pretty good one. Charlie, jump in on the comments if you disagree, maybe not. But I think I have a pretty good marriage, and I love my wife. I look forward to getting home at the end of the day and talking to my wife, and I talk to her about things that I can't talk to anybody else about, and vice versa, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Neither of us are perfect, but also, marriage can be a struggle. I don't know if you're aware, you've been married a little while.
A couple of days.
Marriage, even a good marriage, can be a struggle. And sometimes there are times that I'm not pleasant. And sometimes, there might come a day when my wife is not pleasant, and we'll just have to, it's part of, I think God uses that relationship to shape us and make us more compassionate, make us more gracious, and make us more loving, and we're able to carry that to other people. But it's when marriage works, it demonstrates the goodness of God, it glorifies God, and it's supposed to show the relationship between Christ and His church. Think about what the ideal marriage looks like. Ladies, think about the ideal husband and his love and his devotion and the way he just sacrifices for his wife and lays his life down for her. That's a picture of how Jesus loves the church, how Jesus loves us. And so God doesn't want us to treat marriage lightly. And I think that's more the point of this than, hey, you're divorced, you're bad. It's more, God designed marriage to be this. So stop just throwing it away like garbage, I think is more the point.
Yeah. I mean, like, you think back, even before I was born, there was a time when marriage, boy, there was a bad stigmatism on it, which was not entirely a good thing, because there were some divorces that probably needed to happen. They didn't do because of the way it was looked upon. But, today, we've gone totally the opposite. And, she looked at you wrong, or she dyed her hair wrong color. Well, let's end this. Have we been married a couple of years? The newness is wore off. Let's go get divorced and we'll keep going. I mean, and there is a seriousness to it. When we think about when Christ raptures His church, what a glorious day that will be. And the Bible depicts that like the marriage supper so many times. So, God takes marriage serious. He had the first marriage of Adam and Eve, and He created that. Mm-hmm. So when a marriage is a true marriage, is a unification by God.
That's right.
It's not by man. And what right do we have to tear under what God has put together?
That's right. So, trying to think how to summarize here everything we've talked about. I don't believe you're going to be in trouble from God if you get elected president and take the oath of office. I don't think you're going to be in trouble with God if you get sworn in court. Just cultivate the kind of honesty and the kind of commitment to your word where that sort of thing is unnecessary because you do it anyway. If you've been divorced, it's not the unforgivable sin. It doesn't mean that God hates you. You may have some things to repent of. That's between you and God. I don't presume to know all the details of your situation, but that's something to talk to God about. The main point here is to live up to our commitments in marriage. That we glorify God when we keep our word, especially as it becomes such a rare thing. We live in a society now where people look at you funny when you tell the cashier, you undercharged me, or you forgot to charge me for this. We get looked at strangely when in our society when we are fully committed to our husband or wife. But you know what? I think people see that and they notice the difference, and it glorifies God. So Jesus is calling us here to honor our commitments in everything we say and everything we do. Any final thoughts?
I think we summed it up. The only thing I would say is, Charla, ma'am, your husband sitting here talking before this and looked at the passage and we said, this is going to be a short one, so this is about as short as it gets.
Well, short for a discussion like this. And Latrice, I see, well, Latrice, I'll just say the couple of days comment, that's on me. I was just, what's the reverse of exaggerating? I was de-exaggerating for humorous effect. I know y'all been married longer than I've been alive, so anyway, so I led him down that road. I was just trying to be silly.
Don't worry.
Get too mad at him.
I don't get in troubles with Teresa anymore, because I've gotten so much trouble I can't get out of it, and I'd have to get out of trouble to get in.
There you go. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the time together as much as we have. We do look forward to seeing many of you we'd love to see all of you, but I know some of you aren't even local. We appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to seeing those of you who are local and are able to. Sunday morning we'll be back together at 10:30. If you have questions about the reopening, call Greg. No, there is the video. Go watch that. If you have any questions, call me, text me, whatever you need to do. Or send us a message here on Facebook. But we're looking forward to getting together with all